The National Electrical Code, or NEC, outlines specific guidelines for electrical installations, including those related to kitchen appliances like garbage disposals. A common point of confusion arises regarding the permissible amperage of a circuit serving a garbage disposal when a receptacle is involved. It's essential to clarify that a garbage disposal can indeed be wired on an individual 15-amp branch circuit that includes a receptacle and still be code compliant. The key consideration here is that the standard requirement for kitchen receptacles to be on 20-amp circuits doesn't automatically apply to a receptacle that's part of a dedicated garbage disposal circuit. The NEC prioritizes the specific needs of the appliance being served. Therefore, a dedicated garbage disposal circuit can be wired with 14 American wire gauge, or AUG, wire and protected by a 15-amp overcurrent protection device such as a circuit breaker or fuse. This is based on the anticipated load of the garbage disposal itself. Typically, a garbage disposal's motor draws less than 12 amps during operation. This falls within the allowable load parameters for a 15-amp circuit as defined by the NEC. The presence of a receptacle on this dedicated circuit does not change the fundamental requirement, as long as the receptacle is intended primarily for servicing the garbage disposal and not for general use. For additional safety, it is important that the receptacle is GFCI, or ground fault circuit interrupter, protected. This means that the receptacle should be either a GFCI type receptacle or be fed from a GFCI circuit breaker upstream. GFCI protection helps to prevent electrical shock hazards by quickly interrupting the circuit when a ground fault is detected. A ground fault occurs when electricity unintentionally flows to ground, such as through a person touching a live wire. The GFCI device detects this leakage current and trips the circuit, cutting off the power before a dangerous shock can occur. Conversely, understanding branch circuit requirements is important. Branch circuits are classified by their maximum overcurrent protection. This rating determines the size of the conductors that can be used and the types of loads that can be connected. The NEC specifies the permissible uses for 15-amp, 20-amp, 30-amp, 40-amp, and 50-amp branch circuits. It also dictates what type of loads or how many loads can be placed on a general-purpose circuit. Secondly, the NEC permits 15-amp circuits to serve specific types of loads, including individual appliances that do not draw more than 12 amps. Since most garbage disposals fall within this amperage range, a 15-amp circuit is acceptable, providing that it serves only the disposal. Thirdly, the requirement for 20-amp kitchen receptacle circuits is primarily intended for general-purpose receptacles that are used for countertop appliances and other loads. These receptacles are expected to serve multiple appliances simultaneously, potentially drawing a significant amount of current. Therefore, the 20-amp requirement ensures that the circuit has sufficient capacity to handle these loads without overloading. Fourthly, it's crucial to differentiate between general-purpose kitchen receptacle circuits and dedicated appliance circuits. A dedicated appliance circuit serves only one specific appliance, such as a garbage disposal, dishwasher, or microwave. These circuits are subject to different requirements than general-purpose circuits. Fifthly, the NEC does not explicitly prohibit a 15-amp receptacle on a dedicated garbage disposal circuit. Instead, it focuses on the overall load and safety considerations. As long as the garbage disposal's amperage draw is within the limits of the 15-amp circuit and GFCI protection is provided, the installation is generally considered compliant. Sixthly, an important thing to know is about local amendments. It's important to be aware that local jurisdictions may have amendments to the NEC that could affect the interpretation of these requirements. Therefore, it's always a good practice to consult with the local electrical inspector or building department to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Seventhly, conductor sizing is also very important. When wiring a 15-amp circuit for a garbage disposal, it's essential to use conductors of the appropriate size. Typically, 14 AWG copper conductors are used for 15-amp circuits. However, the specific conductor size may vary depending on the installation conditions and the length of the circuit. It's always best to consult the NEC and local codes to determine the correct conductor size for the application. Eighthly, the overcurrent protection is critical. The overcurrent protection device, such as the circuit breaker or fuse, must be properly sized to protect the circuit from overloads and short circuits. For a 15 amp circuit, a 15 amp overcurrent protection device is required. Using an overcurrent protection device that is too large could allow the circuit to be overloaded, potentially leading to a fire hazard. Ninthly, proper wiring methods are also important. The NEC specifies the acceptable wiring methods for electrical installations. These methods include the use of conduit, cable, and other wiring systems. The specific wiring method used will depend on the application and the local codes. It's essential to follow the NEC requirements for wiring methods to ensure a safe and compliant installation. Tenthly, the final point to know is about inspections. Electrical inspections play a crucial role in ensuring that electrical installations are safe and compliant. During an inspection, the electrical inspector will review the wiring, grounding, overcurrent protection, and other aspects of the installation to verify that it meets the requirements of the NEC and local codes. If the inspector finds any violations, they will require them to be corrected before the installation can be approved. The inspector's initial point of view may have stemmed from a misunderstanding of the specific requirements for dedicated appliance circuits. The general rule for kitchen receptacles to be on 20 amp circuits often leads to the assumption that all kitchen receptacles must adhere to this standard. However, as explained, the NEC allows for exceptions when the receptacle is part of a dedicated circuit for a specific appliance. To further clarify, consider the NEC guidelines on branch circuit loading. The NEC specifies that the total load on a branch circuit should not exceed 80% of the circuit's rating when the load is continuous. A continuous load is defined as a load that operates for 3 hours or more at a time. Since a garbage disposal is not typically considered a continuous load, the 80% limitation does not apply. This means that the garbage disposal can draw up to the full 15 amps of the circuit without violating the NEC loading requirement. Furthermore, it's important to remember that the receptacle on the garbage disposal circuit is primarily intended for the disposal itself. While it could technically be used for other small appliances, such as a blender or food processor, this is not the primary purpose. Therefore, the circuit does not need to be sized to accommodate the potential load of multiple appliances operating simultaneously. The GFCI protection requirement is another critical aspect of the installation. GFCI protection is designed to protect people from electrical shock hazards. In a kitchen environment, where water and electricity are often in close proximity, the risk of electrical shock is higher. GFCI protection helps to mitigate this risk by quickly interrupting the circuit when a ground fault is detected. By providing GFCI protection for the garbage disposal receptacle, the installation meets the NEC safety requirements and reduces the risk of electrical shock. In summary, a garbage disposal can be wired on an individual 15 amp branch circuit that includes a receptacle, provided that the receptacle is GFCI protected and the garbage disposal's amperage draw is within the limits of the circuit. This is a legal and code-compliant installation that meets the NEC safety requirements. When discussing electrical installations with inspectors, it's always helpful to have a thorough understanding of the NEC and local codes. This will allow you to effectively communicate your understanding of the requirements and address any concerns that the inspector may have. In this case, it was a brief conversation to clarify the specific requirements for dedicated appliance circuits. The fact that the inspector ultimately approved the installation after a brief explanation indicates that they were open to considering alternative interpretations of the code. This highlights the importance of having a respectful and collaborative dialogue with inspectors to ensure a safe and compliant electrical installation. When working with electrical systems, safety should always be the top priority. It's essential to follow all applicable codes and regulations and to take precautions to protect yourself from electrical shock hazards. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, it's best to hire a qualified electrician to perform the work. Remember to always energize the circuit before working on any electrical components. This can be done by turning off the circuit breaker that supplies power to the circuit. It's also a good idea to use a voltage tester to verify that the circuit is de-energized before you begin working on it. By following these safety precautions, you can help to prevent electrical accidents and ensure a safe working environment. Furthermore, documentation and labeling are important parts of a safe and compliant electrical installation. Be sure to properly label all circuits and equipment to identify their purpose and function. This will help to prevent confusion and ensure that the electrical system is properly maintained. It's also a good idea to keep a record of all electrical work that is performed, including the date, description of the work, and the name of the person who performed the work. This documentation can be helpful for future maintenance and troubleshooting. In conclusion, wiring a garbage disposal on an individual 15-amp circuit with a GFCI protected receptacle is permissible by the NEC. It is essential to understand the specific code requirements and differentiate between general-purpose receptacle circuits and dedicated appliance circuits. A 15-amp circuit can be used for appliances like a garbage disposal as long as its amperage draw is within the circuit's limit and GFCI protection is provided.